Imagine pulling up to a rusted iron gate on a cold February morning in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the heart of American farming country, and staring at 65 acres of land that hadn't been touched in over a decade. The grass is waist-high, the farmhouse windows are boarded up. There's a John Deere tractor sitting in the barn, tires flat, covered in cobwebs, like it's been waiting for someone. A greenhouse still stands, cracked glass panels and all, with the skeletons of old tomato vines still clinging to the wire inside. And there she is, Martha Ellen Bowman, 44 years old, no farming experience, no agriculture degree, just a woman who had spent the last 18 years managing a mid-sized grocery distribution warehouse in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and one day decided she was done. Her family thought she had lost her mind. Her co-workers laughed behind her back. Even the county agricultural office told her, politely but firmly, that the soil on that property had been neglected so long it would take years before it could produce anything worth selling. But Martha just smiled, signed the deed, handed over $187,000 of her life savings, and walked through that rusted gate like she owned the place. Because she did. And what happened over the next 365 days? Nobody in that town saw it coming. Not even close. To understand what Martha did, you have to understand where she came from. Martha grew up in Berks County, Pennsylvania, about 40 miles from Lancaster. Her grandfather, Raymond Bowman, had kept a small homestead, just 12 acres, where he raised chickens, ducks, and a handful of pigs. Martha spent every summer there as a child. She learned to collect eggs before sunrise. She learned to read the sky before a storm. She learned that animals, if you treat them right, will work with you in ways no machine ever can. But life pulled her in a different direction. College, a career, a salary, a routine. And for almost 2 decades, she traded all of that morning sky and fresh hay for fluorescent lighting and spreadsheets. Then, in the summer of the year before she bought the farm, her mother passed away, and at the funeral, her uncle, one of the last real farmers left in her family, leaned over and said something that Martha later told local newspaper, the Lancaster Farming Weekly, she would never forget. He said, "The land doesn't care how long you've been gone. It'll take you back." 3 months later, she found the listing for the 65-acre property just outside of Quarryville, Pennsylvania, a small borough tucked into the rolling hills of southern Lancaster County, surrounded by some of the most productive farmland in the entire United States. The previous owner, an elderly man named Harold Groff, had been a livestock farmer for over 40 years, before his health forced him to step away. He had left everything behind: the tractor, the greenhouse, the water lines, the old chicken coops, the fencing, all of it. Some people saw an eyesore. Martha saw a foundation. The first thing Martha did after signing those papers was not what you'd expect. She didn't call a contractor. She didn't hire a landscaping crew. She didn't post about it on social media. She drove to the nearest livestock auction, the vintage sales stable in Cochranville, Chester County, and she bought animals. 40 laying hens, 8 Berkshire pigs, 2 dairy goats. People at that auction who recognized her name from the new farm deed scratched their heads. One older farmer, overhearing her purchase, reportedly said, "That woman has no idea what she just got herself into." But here's the thing about Martha Bowman. She had spent 18 years in logistics. She understood supply chains, output schedules, cost per unit analysis, and seasonal demand cycles better than most people half her age. She had spent the entire winter before purchase studying regenerative agriculture. She had read everything she could find about rotational grazing, pastured poultry systems, and composting. She had driven out to visit 2 established farms in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, one in Adams County, Pennsylvania, and another just across the border in Cecil County, Maryland, taking notes, asking questions, and building a plan so detailed it filled an entire 3-ring binder. She wasn't guessing, she was executing. By March, the flat tires on that old John Deere had been replaced. The greenhouse glass panels had been patched and resealed. The chicken coops had been cleaned out, reinforced with fresh lumber, and fitted with new nesting boxes. Martha worked 14-hour days, by herself, with the occasional help of her younger brother Dale, who drove up from Maryland on weekends. She planted the greenhouse in early March, starting with kale, spinach, and mixed greens that could handle the cold. She set up portable electric fencing and began rotating her pigs across sections of the overgrown pasture, letting them root and turn the compacted soil before she followed behind with seed. Neighbors drove past slowly. Some slowed to stare. A few stopped to offer unsolicited opinions. One man who had farmed down the road for 30 years knocked on her door in April and told her the southern pasture soil was dead, his words, and that she was wasting her time trying to grow anything there before at least 2 years of remediation. Martha thanked him for stopping by. Then she went back to work. By May, the first greens from the greenhouse were ready. She loaded them into her truck and drove to a local farmer's market in Lancaster City. She sold out in under 2 hours. She did it again the following Saturday. Sold out again. By June, 2 local restaurants had reached out asking if she could supply them directly. She said yes. Now, here is where the story turns into something nobody expected. Remember those 40 laying hens she bought at auction back in February? By midsummer, Martha had expanded the flock to over 200 birds, using a true pastured poultry rotation system she had modeled off of research from the Rodale Institute in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. Her eggs were rich, golden-yolked, and unlike anything the local market had seen in a while. She began selling them under a simple label she hand-stamped herself, Bowman Hollow Farm. Word spread fast, not just at markets, online. A short video her brother Dale filmed of her collecting eggs at sunrise, posted without much thought on a Friday evening, got picked up by a regional farming page and shared over 12,000 times in a week. By August, she had a wait list for egg subscriptions. But the real shock was what happened to that dead southern pasture. After 6 months of pig rotation, cover cropping, and compost amendment, the same soil that her neighbor had called hopeless was testing at healthy organic matter levels. She planted winter squash there in late July. By September, it was producing. The neighbor who had knocked on her door in April came back. He stood at the edge of that pasture for a long time without saying anything. Then he turned to Martha and said, "I don't know what you did, but I'd like to learn." They've since become friends. He now refers customers to her farm stand. 1 year after Martha Ellen Bowman signed that deed and walked through a rusted gate into a forgotten piece of Lancaster County farmland, here is where she stands. Bowman Hollow Farm is now home to over 220 pastured hens, 12 Berkshire pigs, 4 dairy goats, and a greenhouse operation producing greens and herbs year-round. She supplies 4 local restaurants, sells at 2 weekly farmers markets, and runs a CSA, a community-supported agriculture subscription box, with 67 paying members who pick up fresh eggs, greens, and pork shares every other week. Her first-year gross revenue? Just over $94,000. Not a fortune, but a profit. Real, actual profit in year 1 on a farm that hadn't produced a single dollar in over a decade. The county agricultural office that once gently warned her about the soil? They invited her to speak at their annual farmland preservation conference in February of this year. She stood at that podium in front of 200 farmers, extension agents, and county officials, and she told them the exact same thing her uncle told her at her mother's funeral. The land doesn't care how long you've been gone, it'll take you back. The room gave her a standing ovation. Martha Bowman didn't have the perfect background. She didn't have farming credentials. She didn't have the approval of the people around her when she started. What she had was a plan, a binder full of research, a pair of worn work boots, and the willingness to walk through a gate everyone else had written off. And in 12 months, she turned a forgotten 65 acres in the heart of Pennsylvania farm country into something that made an entire town stop and reconsider what they thought they knew about second chances, and about what the land can do when someone finally shows up to meet it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that it is never too late to bet on something real, then do one thing right now. Hit that subscribe button. Every week, we bring you stories just like Martha's. Stories of people who took the road nobody believed in, did the work nobody was watching, and came out the other side with something that cannot be taken away. These are the stories that don't make the front page, but they should. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come back next week, because the next story we have lined up is even more unbelievable than this one.